Hey there, bibliophiles and those raising bibliophiles. Are you looking to find out which books are worthy of your children to read, which ones you may want to avoid? Well, join me for this week's book review to see if it should be added to your to-read list or your bad book list. So this week's book review is a little bit special in one sense that my niece, who I absolutely adore and love, was so excited that she got this book series for Christmas and she was excited to read it. It had been recommended by some friends at school, and she is not someone who's really an avid reader, so the fact that she was super excited about a book and wanted to read it was really exciting. And then I decided I was going to read the book that she was reading because I just wanted to sort of have something to connect with her about and what story she's reading. Let's just say, praise the Lord that I read this book and was able to get through all of it before she had really started it, because this is not a book you want your children to be reading. This book is in the young adult section of the library because the main characters are 18. Now, honestly, I think if the main characters are 18, that should be an adult fiction, because at 18, you are considered legally adult. So if we're going to have an age bracket that we're going to cut off for young adults, then the characters should stop at 17. So just a little opening of this book, and then I'm going to get into a few things about the book. I am not going to go in super detail about some of the things because it is not appropriate necessarily to fully put on the internet in a video, and you can go and read my written review that took me a long time to put together because there's so much in this book and it looks like a very cute title, definitely engaging storyline for, teenagers. So the inside jacket with the summary of the book, it says, Liz Boxham has always known that Wes Bennett was not boyfriend material. You would think that her next door neighbor would be a prime candidate for her romantic comedy fantasies, but Wes has only proven himself to be a pain in the butt ever since they were little. Wes was the kid who put a frog in her Barbie dream house, the monster who hid a lawn gnome's severed head in her little homemade neighborhood book exchange. Flash forward 10 years from the great gnome decapitation. It's Liz's senior year, a time meant to be rife with milestones perfect for any big screen, and she needs Wes's help. See, Liz's former crush, Michael, has just moved back to town, and horribly annoyingly, he's hitting it off with Wes. Meaning that if Liz wants Michael to finally notice her, and hopefully be her prom date, she needs Wes. He's her in. But as Liz and Wes scheme to get Liz her magical prom moment, she's shocked to discover that she actually likes being around Wes. And as they continue to grow closer, she must re-examine everything she thought she knew about love and rethink her own perception of what happily ever after should really look like. So as a parent, you're going to read that and you think, okay, teenagers, I mean, still they're 18, they're seniors, they're about to graduate. By all means, these are technically adults, okay? But this idea of, a girl wanting to get her dream prom date, okay, not the most sophisticated and great storyline, right? But it could appeal definitely to some girl readers. I can sort of see how, I try to really put my mind back into a teenage girl, and I could see that this might be an appealing storyline, right? Like just one of those romantic comedies, the girl trying to get the guy or vice versa, and your big prom date, the whole thing, right? Totally fits within that genre. However, let's go into a few more details. First of all, every single chapter starts with a quote from a movie that's like one of those romantic comedy movies. So this one starts, I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy asking him to love her, which is from Notting Hill. So I'm just going to read this first chapter. It's technically the prologue because it really sort of sets the idea of Liz's character that influences her perceptions, her actions throughout the story. My mother taught me the golden rule of dating before I even hit second grade. At the ripe age of 7, I'd snuck into her room after having a nightmare. A house-sized cricket might not sound scary, but when it speaks in a robot voice and knows your middle name, it's terrifying. Bridget Jones's Diary was playing on the boxy television on top of the dresser, and I'd watched a good portion of the movie before she even noticed me at the foot of her bed. At that point, it was too late to rescue me from the not-so-first grade friendly content, so she snuggled up beside me and we watched the happy ending together. In case you are not familiar with Bridget Jones's Diary, this is a rated R movie. But my first grade brain just couldn't compute. Why would Bridget give up the cuter one, the charming one, for the person who was the equivalent of one ginormous yawn? How did that even make sense? Yep, I'd missed the movie's point completely and had fallen madly in love with the Playboy. And to this day, I can still hear my mom's voice and smell the vanilla of her perfume as she played with my hair and set me straight. Charm and intrigue can only get you so far, Libby Lou. Those things always disappear, which is why you never ever choose the bad boy. After that, we shared hundreds of similar moments exploring life together through romantic movies. It was our thing. We'd snack up, kick back on the pillows, and binge watch from her collection of kiss-infused happy endings like other people binge watch trashy reality TV. Which in hindsight is probably why I've been waiting for the perfect romance since I was old enough to spell the word love. And when she died, my mother bequeathed to me her unwavering belief in happily ever after. My inheritance was the knowledge that love is always in the air, always a possibility, and always worth it. Mr. Right, the nice guy, dependable version, would be waiting around the next corner, which was why I was always at the ready. It was only a matter of time before it finally happened to me. So off the bat, from a biblical worldview, right, clearly Liz is trying to find her worth, her value, this sense of love and romance from the world, and particularly from a boy. Instead of understanding that as a character, or as people really, like that we are wholly begotten and loved by God, right, who sent his only son to die for us, right? There's no greater love and show of love than that, right? But Liz is looking for love in literally all the wrong places, okay? And she's really just focused on and been delusional, deluded by these ideas of grand romantic gestures. And really that can be a dangerous thing to be putting in the minds of young girls reading this book, right? I would maybe hope that if this was 18 and up, which is, if anyone plans to read this, it definitely should be 18 and up, all right, given the age and some of the things that occur in this particular book. But most importantly, I would hope at that age, right, you would have more of a realistic foundation of what romantic relationships are like. This book is listed for ages 12 to 18. Young girls are incredibly impressionable, and so putting in these notions and ideas that they should have these expectations from a romantic relationship to be like the movies is unrealistic, and it's setting them up for hurt. It's setting them up to compromise in situations because they are seeking that love and affirmation from the guy. So from the standpoint, like all of that stuff, like I'm not against a good, girl meets boy, cute little story. In fact, I have gotten a few books, done some research on a few books, and my niece is very much into wanting, I think, that romantic comedy sort of genre. So I've gotten a few books that I'm going to read through, and hopefully I can find some good recommendations. Certainly not a genre that I typically read in, but I want to try and find some other options that would be available for her. All right, so that's a whole lot, and I haven't even actually gotten to the book other than to show you that there's this connection between Liz and all these romantic movies that she's been watching since the young age of 7, and that has really influenced her as a character and her expectations of her relationships with other boys around her. The premise, like I said, Liz has got her eyes set on Michael, okay? So I kind of read that in the beginning. She's got her eyes set on Michael, this crush that she had when she was younger. He's moved back to town, and her goal is to get Michael to ask her to the prom. So we're talking about a pretty short amount of time here, maybe about 2-3 weeks within the story. And in order to get Michael to ask her to prom, she's got to ask Wes for help, and that's her neighbor, and they pretty much like hate each other. Not really hate, but like, a gesturing hate. They fight over a parking spot in front of their houses, that kind of thing. Unbeknownst to Liz, but obvious to the readers as you're going through it, obviously Wes likes Liz. Maybe some younger teenage readers reading this, like, that isn't clear to them, but you can tell from, as an adult at least, or I would think, maybe a more knowing reader could clearly tell that Wes liked Liz. So a lot of this picking and instigating with her was just to get those interactions with her because he does like her. In the end of the novel, despite this awkward prom night, Liz and Wes do confess their like for one another, and it ends with them going to UCLA together in the fall. The plot is definitely predictable. The characters are a little bit cliche, but you kind of expect that in a romance comedy, so that isn't really much of a shock. Liz is mildly interesting only in the fact that what actually makes Liz an interesting character is that aside from trying to get Michael to ask her to prom, which is not that interesting really, is the fact that she's also dealing with the fact that her mother died. So when she was in elementary school, I think about 5th grade in the story, her mother passed away from a drunk driver. And so in the story, she's in her senior year, she's hitting all these major milestones, but she's really dealing with the grief that her mother is not present with her through these milestones. That is honestly the only part of the story that sort of makes Liz an interesting character as she's trying to navigate this between not having her mom with her, but her dad has remarried. And so that relationship with the stepmom and her trying to step in, but not really taking her mom's place, but Liz is feeling like she does. So that's all in there to sort of say. Honestly, though, what is keeping teen readers really probably reading this book and why they liked it is it's pretty salacious. And so a lot of sexual innuendos, a lot of profanity is used throughout. And I think ultimately what has probably made this book feel successful is that for teen readers, there's a sense of rebelliousness in reading something like this, right? It's like watching a rated R movie that you probably shouldn't have been reading or watching, and your parents didn't know. The story is told in first person through Liz's point of view. Like I said, you're going to see at the beginning of each chapter, we have references to movies. Some of them are rated R, some are not. Liz, she is really obsessed with Bridget Jones's Diary, and so there's a couple references throughout to that. There's even a point at which, her friends are teasing her that she's in love with love. Now, I started reading this book hoping to read something and connect with my niece in another way. And instead, by the time I got to page 6 and 7, I'm texting pages to my brother to let him know that this may not be the book he wants her to read. My niece is 14, so maybe that helps if you're thinking that, she's 17 and I'm jerking this off her shelf. But ultimately, honestly, at whatever age, I don't know that they should be reading this. And the fact that it's on the shelf, parents have no idea what really is in this book. So starting on page 6, you have the F word used, and that word is used probably about 4 more other times in the book. If you go to my review, you can see the exact pages that you're going to find those on. And then I get to page 7, and there's a reference to porn. We're page 6 and 7, people. I didn't get too far into the book before I found some of that stuff. And then I just kept reading because I wanted to finish the book so I could at least say to my brother and my niece, I read the whole book. These are all the things that are in this book. So if you take just a quick moment, look at this picture here. These are my sticky notes. So when I read books, I'm often sticky noting them either for great quotes, but also mainly for profanity or sexual references. These are all profanity and sexual references that are in this book. I used a lot of sticky notes. But you're going to see other profanity throughout. One of the main words that's used in various forms is shit and ass. You're going to see a lot of that. You're also going to see some more, and again, check my review for that. There's a lot of sexual innuendos. Her cat is named Fitzpervert to start with. Like I said, you had the reference to porn. There's also a lot of references to kissing, but also a lot of sexual references. Please check my review for those. Obviously, if you're at this point and you're like, I don't even need to check your review because that sounds like a no. But if you're interested and you want to see specifically what I'm talking about, you're going to find those there. One of the other things about Liz's character is that she's obsessed with listening to soundtracks, and particularly soundtracks that go to romantic movies or with popular music. And she uses sort of that idea to like create soundtracks for her life. Again, something that seems harmless and cute, but also soundtracks are powerful, right? Those are anything that we're telling ourselves over and over and over again and listening to. And so we want our children to have positive, right, godly soundtracks that are playing in their mind as they go through life, not things that are so fleshly, desire, and focused on. And that's one of the things in this book too that I think you have to use caution, especially with a lot of books with these sexual components to them. We have young people who are getting a hold of these books, and it can awaken or stir a sense of desire that they're not ready for, and certainly is something that parents should be aware of are in these books. And I really wish that this book is one of those that should have like a disclaimer, like lots of profanity and sexual references, regulation of some sort where we can have those labels just like you would with a movie. All right. Obviously, if this were going to get a movie rating, it would probably be PG-13 because nothing happens, like there's no full out sex scenes. But there are definitely references to those desires and those feelings within the book. You also have references to beer and drinking. Liz goes to a keg party early in the book. There are just like a few quotes that are somewhat, decent in the story. But a lot of those references actually sort of give that foreshadowing and undertone of the book, like where Liz is, making a comment about fake relationships. Meanwhile, she's in a fake relationship trying to get Michael, that kind of stuff. If you grew up in a secular environment like I did when I was younger, all the movie references in this book are definitely something that you're going to know and be familiar with well. I assume the author probably grew up in the same sort of generation I did, having the references to some of these movies. And I'll be honest, a good number of these movies I had seen before I became an adult, and even before I became a Christian for sure. And so I can see the draw, I can see the appeal, but I also see the danger. This is definitely something I did not want my niece reading, something I do not want my own daughter reading. And so I really think it's important to kind of get that out there and share that about this book so parents are aware, whether you're in the public library or your children go to a public school. My guess is it wouldn't surprise me if this book is in the school, probably propped up on something like, hey, read this book. So I do not recommend this book at all. I don't think it should be available to young adult readers, or at least not put in that section, and that it should be put in the adult section. The characters are 18, for goodness sakes. And I, full disclosure, I can certainly see where if you're in a secular world view and living that life and some of the experiences and influences I had when I was young, I can definitely see that in the book. But if I could go back and do things over again, and definitely with my own daughter and niece, like those are not things that I want them thinking about. Because as a girl, you can be so impressionable and build up these romantic notions and ideas based on these movies or these books based on movies. And that's not something that's positive for our girls. We want them to know that they are chosen and loved by Lord Almighty, right? That He has called them to purity in thought and deed and all of those great things, and that there are things that emotions and desires that should be saved for marriage and not something explored in a teen novel. So take all that for what it's worth. Hopefully that is informative for you as a family, as parents, to make decisions about what books are available for your children to read. But definitely just kind of want to put that one on your radar, that it's not as harmless as it seems.